Hi, welcome to Botanica month 5. We're starting to work, almost get done with everything. We have one more month left after this one, so it's really exciting. So this month we are doing the Starburst pattern. So that is this block right here, and of course we're going to bring those 4 blocks together and it's really going to look like an amazing starburst. So this month we don't need any of our embroidery threads. This is all going to be basically that stitch and flip method. There will be some overlays, but mostly stitch and flip. This one's a little bit more tedious because there is a wide gradient. I've already prepped my fabrics and I've got them in the order for which I will be pulling them, plus my blacks. So that's about all I have. As usual, I've already got it. I've already got it loaded up. You don't make any modifications to the design, so I'm ready to go. So let's get started. We've gotten our batting in place. Now we're ready to put down our very first color. In this instance, it's going to be the black. That's going to be the center of our starburst. So you'll want to remember, this is going to be overlay, but remember, since we're at the edge, we want to make sure we have plenty of fabric to have that 1/2 inch seam allowance later. So you'll notice I have a big piece, even though I'm only covering up this small area. So when I trim, I'm going to trim here and trim here, but I'm going to leave all of this for when the block is finished. So that's the one thing you have to remember, is always remember we need at least a 1/2 inch seam allowance beyond this batting for cutting out the block. So from here on out, it's mostly stitch and flip, but the thing you have to remember is almost every single one comes to this outer edge. So you're always putting excess out to the right or the left, wherever it is that that edge is at. So remember, the most important thing to remember is I'm going to cut here and here, but I'm going to leave all of this out here. Okay, so as you can see, it's mostly about keeping your fabrics organized. So I had already had these stacked up in the order that they were going to go in, and I knew each one would have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And I made sure I had long enough strips so I have my 1.5 inches. Now this next one, so that's my biggest recommendation. Just have these stacked up ready to go in the order that you need them. We have one more color, but I want to show you something unique about this one. This next color, it will have some part on this edge and some part on this edge. So now I've got to make sure, like on this one, I made sure I had enough for this edge. On this one, I have to have a strip long enough to cover both this edge and this edge plus the piece itself. So remember, I've got to make sure I have a minimum of 1/2 inch here and a minimum of 1/2 inch on the other side. And I can see that I do. So here's the edge of my batting. So I've got a good 1/2 inch there and a good 1.5 inches here. I always prefer to lean on the side of having too much than not enough. So if there was one area I messed up a lot on, is I would get into the mode of just cut, cut. But on this one, remember, this is the outer edge of your block, but this is not. So just take the time. You're only going to cut along this line. You're going to keep this extra here. You're going to keep this extra here, but on this piece, you are going to cut off here and then just go outward. I'll show you this as soon as I cut it so you can see what I mean. So I want to make sure you can see I've only cut where it's on the batting, but anything that's leaving the batting, I'm leaving that there for when we trim down our block. That was the one place I messed up the most when I was doing this block, is I got into my routines here, and when I hit this one, I'd forget and I'd cut it wrong, and then I'd have to deal with trying to fix that. If you're asking me how I quote unquote fixed that, just know I had to basically rip out all those strips and redo that row again. So this is another instance where I've got to make sure not only do I have enough to cover that area, but I also have enough at the top and the bottom at a minimum 1/2 inch for the overlay. And remember, we're going to be flipping out, so there's got to be enough here and enough here. So again, on this block, it's so easy to get kind of stuck into that routine. So remember, this is the outer edge. We're not going to touch that. We're only going to cut here, and then we're going to cut off because we're going to keep this part, and this part. Remember, outside of the block, we got to keep that 1/2 inch. And this is the one area I kept messing up on. So the rest of your pieces are going to be black. And again, I've just got to make sure I've got enough for all the edges that's going to be coming near. And remember, as a side note, I am using neon thread so that you at home can see very clearly where these stitches are coming out. I don't recommend you use neon thread when putting your block together. Let me show you a little shortcut you can do. Since they didn't immediately do the next one, I could, in theory, go ahead and start this one and get that one out and then clip the two whenever I take away the hoop. It gives you just a tiny reprieve from going back and forth and back and forth. Since they're nowhere close to each other, we can go ahead and lay them both down. Okay, so I just want to remind you again, because like I said, this is where I messed up the most. I'm just cutting away roughly till I get to the part that's on the batting. I'm going to clip that away and then go straight up. I need all the rest of the fabric for when I do my final trim. Same thing on this side. So it looks a little bit like a funny cut, but trust me, this is how you want to do it. Okay, we're going to do our last two pieces and then we're ready to trim up. Okay, our block is finished. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of the hoop and we're going to go ahead and trim away the excess so we can see what it's going to look like. Okay, so when we're putting together this block, I've always taught you to do it with a lot of excess. I always prefer to have too much rather than not enough. So as I've shown you in previous videos, I first line up. Make sure I have my 1/2 inch from the edges here. So I do 1 and then 2. Okay. Then I'm going to flip it and do it on the other 2 corners. Lining it out with my neon line so I can clearly see where my edges are at. And I'm going to do 1 and 2. All right, and there we have our block. So we have no satin stitching on this block. So that means you're able to go straight to the iron and give her a good press on the front, okay? So I'm just giving her a really good press. Make sure all those folds are nice and sharp. The next thing I recommend, although it's up to you, I use that piece and tear because I want to have as little stabilizer in my final product as I can. So I go ahead and I take the time to go ahead and tear this out. That is where my curved tip awl comes in very handy. So that helps me kind of come in and just start tearing away at some of these pieces. Again, you need a good Netflix episode to kind of get you through it, but you can start tearing all of these away, and the awl kind of just helps me get better grip and control as I do that. It is a tedious job, so it would take me an entire episode of Netflix, but other than that, we are now done with month 5, and we look forward to seeing you in the next month.